Mark Hargrove stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. The soft cotton of his crisp white shirt felt cool against his skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of pride swelling in his chest. Tonight was his night, a celebration of years of hard work finally paying off. He caught Laura's reflection as she swept into the bedroom, a whirlwind of floral perfume and silk. "You almost ready?" she asked, her voice tight with an edge Mark couldn't quite place. "Just about," he replied, turning to face her. His eyes traced the elegant lines of her emerald dress, noting how it hugged her curves in all the right places. "You look stunning." Laura's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks," she murmured, brushing past him to grab her earrings from the dresser. Mark frowned, sensing the underlying tension. He reached out, his fingers grazing her arm. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Laura said, shrugging off his touch. "We should get downstairs. The guests will be here any minute." As if on cue, the doorbell chimed. Mark sighed, pushing aside the nagging feeling that something was off. Tonight was about celebration, not confrontation. Downstairs, their suburban Portland home transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. Friends and colleagues filled the space, their chatter and laughter creating a symphony of success. Mark moved through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations with a practiced smile. "There he is, the man of the hour," boomed Derek Hensley, Mark's closest friend and go-to private investigator. He clapped Mark on the back, nearly spilling his drink in the process. Mark grinned, genuinely this time. "Glad you can make it, Derek. How's business?" Derek's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Oh, people are always up to no good. Keeps me in business." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Speaking of which, how are things with Laura? She seems a bit distant tonight." Mark's smile faltered for a moment. "Just stressed with work, I think. You know how it is?" Derek nodded, but his expression remained unconvinced. Before he could press further, Laura appeared at Mark's side, her smile brittle. "Mark, honey, why don't you say a few words?" she suggested, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Everyone's here to celebrate your promotion, after all." Mark nodded, squeezing her hand before stepping to the center of the room. He cleared his throat, and the chatter died down as all eyes turned to him. "First off, I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice strong and clear. "This promotion is not just a personal achievement. It's a testament to the power of hard work and determination." As Mark spoke, his gaze swept the room, taking in the proud faces of his friends and colleagues. But when his eyes landed on Laura, he faltered. She stood apart from the group, her attention focused on her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Pushing down a flicker of annoyance, Mark continued, "I wouldn't be here without the support of my incredible wife, Laura." At the sound of her name, Laura's head snapped up, a guilty flush spreading across her cheeks as she hastily pocketed her phone. "To new beginnings and continued success," Mark concluded, raising his glass. The room echoed with cheers and the clinking of glasses. As the party wound down and the last guest trickled out, Mark found himself alone in the kitchen, loading dishes into the dishwasher. The house felt too quiet now, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Laura padded into the kitchen, her heels dangling from her fingers. "That went well," she said, her voice lacking enthusiasm. Mark straightened, turning to face her. "Did it? You seemed distracted all night." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Come on, Laura. You were on your phone half the time, barely talking to anyone. This was supposed to be our night." "Your night, you mean?" Laura shot back, her voice rising. "It's always about you and your career, isn't it? God forbid I have my own life, my own interests." Mark recoiled as if slapped. "That's not fair. Everything I do for us. For our future." Laura laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that scraped against Mark's nerves. "Our future? When was the last time we even talked about our future, Mark? When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about your work? I'm trying to build something here, Laura, to give us the life we always wanted. And what if this isn't the life I want anymore?" Laura's words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Mark felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. He reached for Laura, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "I'm going to bed," she said, her voice suddenly tired. "Congratulations on your promotion, Mark. I hope it makes you happy." As Laura's footsteps faded up the stairs, Mark stood alone in the kitchen, the remnants of celebration scattered around him like the pieces of his crumbling world. The next few days passed in a blur of tense silences and stilted conversations. Mark threw himself into his work, staying late at the office to avoid the Cold War brewing at home. He told himself it was just a rough patch, that every couple went through ups and downs. But the nagging doubt in the back of his mind refused to be silenced. It was nearly midnight when Mark's phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the quiet of his office. He frowned at the unfamiliar number, a sense of unease settling in his stomach as he answered. "Is this Mark Hargrove?" a woman's voice asked, clinical and detached. "Yes, this is he. Mr. Hargrove, I'm calling from Portland General Hospital. Your wife, Laura Hargrove, has been admitted following an accident." The world tilted on its axis. Mark gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. "What happened? Is she okay?" The nurse's voice softened slightly. "She's stable, but unconscious. I'm afraid I don't have many details about the incident. It occurred at a private residence. A Mr. Ryan Caldwell brought her in." Ryan Caldwell. The name meant nothing to Mark, but it sent a chill down his spine. "I'll be right there," he managed to say before ending the call. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and racing thoughts. Mark's mind conjured 1,000 scenarios, each worse than the last. By the time he burst through the emergency room doors, his heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear the receptionist's directions. As he rounded the corner to the waiting area, Mark spotted a man pacing nervously, his expensive suit rumpled and his dark hair mussed. The man's head snapped up as Mark approached, and something like guilt flashed across his face. "Are you Ryan Caldwell?" Mark demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The man nodded, straightening his posture. "Yes, I am. You must be Mark. I'm so sorry about what happened. It was just a terrible accident." Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "What accident? What the hell happened to my wife?" Ryan held up his hands, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. Laura and I were..." He stumbled over his words, and Mark felt his blood run cold. "You were what?" Mark growled, stepping closer. Ryan swallowed hard. "We were together, at my house. Things got a little intense. There was a game, and look, I never meant for anyone to get hurt." The implication of Ryan's words hit Mark like a physical blow. He staggered back, his mind reeling. "You and Laura, you're having an affair?" Ryan's silence was all the confirmation Mark needed. With a roar of rage, he lunged forward, his fist connecting with Ryan's jaw. The other man stumbled back, crashing into a row of chairs. "Mr. Hargrove," a nurse's sharp voice cut through the haze of anger. "I'm going to have to ask you to calm down or leave the premises." Mark stood over Ryan, his chest heaving. "Where is she?" he demanded. The nurse pointed down the hall. "Room 305. "But sir, she's not conscious." "You can't," but Mark was already moving, leaving Ryan sprawled on the floor. He burst into Laura's room, his anger evaporating at the sight of her still form on the hospital bed. Laura looked small and fragile, tubes and wires connecting her to various machines. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. Mark approached the bed slowly, as if in a trance. "Oh, Laura," he whispered, sinking into the chair beside her. "What have you done?" As he sat there, holding Laura's limp hand, memories flooded Mark's mind. Their first date, the nervous excitement as he proposed, the joy on their wedding day. When had it all gone so wrong? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A doctor entered, her face grave. "Mr. Hargrove? I'm Dr. Chun. I've been overseeing your wife's care." Mark stood, his legs shaky. "How is she? When will she wake up?" Dr. Chen's hesitation spoke volumes. "Mr. Hargrove, your wife suffered a severe head injury. While we've managed to stabilize her, I'm afraid there's a possibility she may never regain consciousness." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of Laura's bed for support. "Never," he choked out. "It's too early to say for certain," Dr. Chen said gently. "But you should be prepared for the possibility." "I'm so sorry." As the doctor left, Mark collapsed back into the chair, his mind reeling. The woman lying in the bed suddenly felt like a stranger. His wife, his Laura, would never have betrayed him like this, would never have thrown away their life together for some tawdry affair. Anger began to simmer beneath his grief. Why should he suffer for her mistakes? Why should he put his life on hold for someone who clearly didn't value their marriage? With shaking hands, Mark pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Derek's number. "Derek? It's Mark. I need your help. It's about Laura and a man named Ryan Caldwell." As he ended the call, Mark looked at Laura's unconscious form one last time. His jaw set with determination. If she wanted to throw away their life together, fine. But he wouldn't let her decisions destroy him. Mark stood, decision made. He cut her off financially, cancel her credit cards, and demand she leave their home if when she recovered. It was time to reclaim his dignity, to focus on his own life. As he walked out of the hospital room, Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to him alone. The harsh fluorescent lights of Mark's office cast long shadows across his face as he hunched over his desk, staring at the phone. It had been 3 days since Laura's hospitalization, and the anger that had propelled him out of the hospital still simmered beneath the surface. A sharp knock jolted him from his thoughts. Derek's concerned face peered around the door. "You look like hell, man," Derek said, stepping into the office and closing the door behind him. Mark scrubbed a hand over his face, feeling the stubble rasp against his palm. "Thanks for coming, Derek. I need your help." Derek settled into the chair across from Mark, his expression serious. "What do you need?" "I need you to dig into Ryan Caldwell," Mark said, his voice hard. "I want to know everything about him. His business, his personal life, his dirty laundry, all of it." Derek leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Mark, are you sure about this? It's not too late to what?" Mark snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "To forgive and forget? To pretend my wife didn't throw away our marriage for some fling?" Derek held up his hands in surrender. All right, I get it. But Mark, you need to be prepared. Whatever I find, it might not make things easier." Mark's jaw clenched. "I don't want easier. I want the truth." Derek nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "Okay, give me everything you know about this Ryan guy." As Mark recounted the little information he had, Derek scribbled notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When Mark finished, Derek stood, tucking the notebook into his jacket pocket. "I'll get on this right away," he said. "But Mark, promise me something?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Take care of yourself. You look like you haven't slept in days." Mark waved him off. "I'm fine. Just find what you can." As Derek left, Mark turned to his computer, determined to lose himself in work. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Laura's unconscious form in the hospital bed, a stark reminder of his shattered world. Days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled workdays. Mark threw himself into his job with a fervor that both impressed and concerned his colleagues. He avoided calls from Laura's family, ignoring their pleas for information and reconciliation. It was nearly 2 weeks later when Derek burst into Mark's office, a thick folder tucked under his arm. "You're not going to believe what I found," Derek said, dropping the folder on Mark's desk with a satisfying thud. Mark leaned forward, his heart racing. "Tell me?" Derek pulled up a chair, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. "This Ryan Caldwell? He's not just some random businessman. He's the owner of a pretty successful tech startup, but that's just the tip of the iceberg." Mark flipped open the folder, scanning the documents inside. "What am I looking at here?" "Bank statements, emails, business contracts," Derek said, pointing to each in turn. "This guy has been using his charm and connections to manipulate people for years. And get this, Laura wasn't his first affair. Not by a long shot." Mark's grip on the papers tightened, crinkling the edges. "Go on." Derek leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "He's been using these affairs to gain access to influential people in the industry. Laura, I hate to say it, man, but she was just his latest target." The realization hit Mark like a physical blow. He pushed back from the desk, pacing the small office. "So, all this time she was just a pawn in his game?" Derek nodded grimly. "Looks that way. But here's where it gets really interesting. I found evidence of some pretty shady business practices. Fraudulent activities, manipulated contracts, the works. This guy's built his empire on quicksand, Mark." Mark stopped pacing, a cold determination settling over him. "Can you prove it? With what I've got here?" "Absolutely," Derek said, tapping the folder. "But Mark, what are you planning to do with this information?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across Mark's face. "I'm going to destroy him, Derek. Just like he tried to destroy me." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Mark, I get that you're angry, but nothing." Mark cut him off. "He didn't just hurt me, Derek. He's been hurting people for years. It's time someone put a stop to it." Derek stood, holding up his hands in surrender. "All right, it's your call. Just be careful, okay? This guy has connections. He could make things difficult for you." Mark's eyes hardened. "Let him try." As Derek left, Mark settled back behind his desk, spreading out the documents before him. A plan began to form in his mind, a way to expose Ryan's misdeeds to the world. He reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Holly Chun, investigative journalist. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Holly Chen speaking. Ms. Chen? This is Mark Hargrove. We met at the Portland Business Leaders Gala last year. Mark said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Mr. Hargrove, yes, I remember. What can I do for you? Mark took a deep breath. I have a story for you. One that could blow the lid off some major corporate corruption in the tech industry. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Holly spoke again, her voice was cautious but intrigued. I'm listening. I'd rather not discuss details over the phone, Mark said. Can we meet? My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Holly replied without hesitation. And Mr. Hargrove? This better be good. The line went dead, and Mark leaned back in his chair, a mix of anticipation and trepidation swirling in his gut. There was no turning back now. The next day, Mark found himself in the bustling offices of the local newspaper. Holly Chen's cubicle was an organized chaos of papers, post-it notes, and half-empty coffee cups. Holly herself was a whirlwind of energy, her sharp eyes taking in every detail as Mark laid out the evidence before her. This is incredible, she murmured, flipping through the documents. If even half of this is true, it could bring down Caldwell's entire operation. Mark leaned forward, his voice low and intense. It's all true, every last bit of it. I've verified the sources myself. Holly looked up, her gaze piercing. And you're willing to go on record with this? Mark hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. But then he thought of Laura, lying unconscious in that hospital bed, and his resolve hardened. Yes, he said firmly. I'll go on record. Holly nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Then let's get to work. The next few days were a whirlwind of interviews, fact-checking, and late-night strategy sessions. Mark found himself energized by the process, his desire for justice overshadowing the lingering pain of betrayal. As Holly's investigation deepened, more and more of Ryan's misdeeds came to light. Questionable contracts, manipulated financial reports, and a trail of broken promises and shattered lives. It was late one evening, as Mark and Holly pored over a particularly damning set of emails, that Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Turn on the news. Now. Frowning, Mark reached for the remote, flicking on the small TV in Holly's office. The image of Ryan Caldwell filled the screen, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled and harried. Categorically deny all allegations of wrongdoing, Ryan was saying, his voice strained. These accusations are baseless and will be proven false in due course. Holly leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. He knows it's coming. Someone must have tipped him off. Mark's fists clenched at his sides. It doesn't matter. We have the truth on our side. As they watched, Ryan's facade of confidence crumbled, replaced by a desperate plea. I asked for privacy during this difficult time for my family and my company. Thank you. The camera panned out, revealing a woman standing slightly behind Ryan. Her face was a mask of barely contained fury, her body rigid with tension. That must be his wife, Holly murmured. Marissa, I think her name is... Mark felt a twinge of sympathy for the woman, quickly buried beneath his own anger. She deserves to know the truth, too. Holly nodded, already reaching for her phone. I'll see if I can get an interview with her. This could add a whole new dimension to the story. As Holly made her calls, Mark found himself staring at the frozen image of Ryan on the TV screen. The man who had nearly destroyed his life now looked small and pathetic, his arrogance stripped away. But even as satisfaction coursed through him, Mark felt a hollowness in his chest. This victory, as sweet as it was, couldn't erase the pain of Laura's betrayal. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call from the hospital. Mark's heart raced as he answered. Mr. Hargrove? This is Nurse Jenkins from Portland General. I'm calling about your wife, Laura. Mark's mouth went dry. Yes? Has there been any change? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Mark could hear the bustle of the hospital in the background. Mr. Hargrove, I'm pleased to inform you that your wife has shown signs of regaining consciousness. The doctors are optimistic about her recovery. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Mark gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white. She's waking up? It's a gradual process, but yes. The doctors would like you to come in as soon as possible. Mark ended the call in a daze, his mind reeling. Holly looked up from her own phone conversation, her brow furrowed in concern. Mark, is everything okay? He shook his head, struggling to find the words. Laura, she's waking up? Holly's eyes widened. Oh my God. Mark, you should go. We can handle things here. But Mark hesitated, torn between the desire to see Laura and the fear of facing the reality of their broken marriage. I don't know if I can, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Holly stood, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Mark, I know you're hurt and angry, but don't you think you owe it to yourself to at least hear her out? Mark closed his eyes, memories of happier times flashing through his mind. When he opened them again, his jaw was set with determination. You're right. I need to face this head on. As he gathered his things to leave, Holly called out to him. Mark, whatever happens, you're doing the right thing. Remember that? With a nod of gratitude, Mark left the office, his heart pounding with each step. The drive to the hospital was a blur of conflicting emotions: hope, fear, anger, and a tiny, persistent spark of love that refused to be extinguished. As he walked through the hospital corridors, Mark steeled himself for the confrontation to come. Whatever happened next, he knew his life would never be the same. The antiseptic smell of the hospital assaulted Mark's senses as he stepped out of the elevator. His footsteps echoed in the quiet corridor, each one bringing him closer to a confrontation he both dreaded and craved. Outside Laura's room, he paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. The anger that had fueled him for weeks warred with a sudden, overwhelming anxiety. Mr. Hargrove? Mark turned to see Dr. Chen approaching, her white coat swishing softly as she walked. How is she? Mark asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Chen's face softened with compassion. She's awake and alert. But Mr. Hargrove, I must warn you, she's confused and disoriented. This is normal after a coma, but it can be distressing for family members. Mark nodded stiffly. I understand. Can I see her? Of course, but please try to stay calm. Any agitation could impede her recovery. With a deep breath, Mark pushed open the door. The room was dimly lit, the soft beeping of machines a constant backdrop. And there, propped up in the bed, was Laura. She looked small and fragile, her skin pale against the white hospital sheets. But her eyes, those eyes that had once looked at him with such love, were open and alert. Mark! Her voice was barely above a whisper, rough from disuse. He approached the bed slowly, his emotions a turbulent mix of relief, anger, and a love he couldn't quite extinguish. Laura, he said, his tone carefully neutral. How are you feeling? She frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. I don't understand. What happened? Why am I here? Mark's jaw clenched. Even now, was she going to play innocent? You don't remember? He asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Laura shook her head, wincing at the movement. Everything's fuzzy. I remember the party for your promotion. But after that, she trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Mark, please. What's going on? For a moment, Mark was tempted to unleash all his anger, to tell her exactly what she'd done. But as he looked at her frightened, confused face, he hesitated. You had an accident, he said finally, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. You've been in a coma for weeks. Laura's eyes widened in shock. Weeks? But how? What kind of accident? Mark turned away, unable to bear the sight of her apparent innocence. Maybe we should wait until you're feeling stronger to discuss this. No. Laura's voice was stronger now, tinged with desperation. Mark, please. I need to know. Why do you look at me like that? Like you hate me? The raw pain in her voice broke through Mark's carefully constructed walls. He spun back to face her, his own anguish bubbling to the surface. Because you betrayed me, Laura, he exploded. You threw away our marriage for some fling with a man you barely knew. Laura recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her face draining of what little color it had. What? No, that's not possible. I would never. But you did. Mark cut her off, his voice hard. With Ryan Caldwell. Ring any bells? Laura's eyes clouded with confusion, then slowly, horrifyingly, cleared with recognition. Ryan? Oh God, Mark, I'm so sorry. I never meant. Save it, Mark snapped, turning towards the door. I can't do this right now. As he reached for the handle, Laura's broken voice stopped him. Mark, please. Don't go. I know I don't deserve it, but please. Can we talk about this? Mark stood frozen, his hand on the door. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to protect himself from more pain. But something, maybe the last vestiges of the love they once shared, made him turn back. Fine, he said, his voice tight. Talk. Laura took a shuddering breath, her hands twisting the hospital blanket. I don't know where to start. It's all so jumbled in my head. But Mark, you have to believe me. I never meant to hurt you. Mark laughed bitterly. And yet, here we are. I know, Laura whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Mark, our marriage, it wasn't perfect. You were always working, always focused on the next promotion, the next big deal. I felt invisible. So that justifies cheating? Mark's voice was razor sharp. Laura shook her head vehemently. No, no, nothing justifies that. I was weak and selfish and stupid. Ryan, he made me feel seen, appreciated. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? Mark's anger deflated slightly, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Yeah, he was using you, Laura. Using your connections to further his own agenda. Laura's face crumpled. Oh God, I'm such an idiot. Mark, a sharp knock at the door interrupted her. A nurse poked her head in, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Hargrove needs her rest now. You can come back during visiting hours tomorrow. Mark nodded, almost grateful for the interruption. As he turned to leave, Laura's hand shot out, grasping his wrist. Mark, please. Will you come back tomorrow? I know I have no right to ask, but please. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her tear-stained face. Despite everything, a part of him ached to comfort her, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But he couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'll think about it, he said finally, gently disengaging from her grip. As he left the hospital, Mark felt as if he'd aged a decade in the span of an hour. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, probably Holly, eager for an update on both Laura and their story. But Mark couldn't face any of it right now. He needed space, time to process the maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. He drove aimlessly, eventually finding himself at a small park overlooking the city. As he sat on a bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon, his phone rang again. This time, it was Derek. Mark, where are you, man? Holly's been trying to reach you for hours. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm fine, Derek. I just needed some time to think. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Derek spoke again, his voice was uncharacteristically gentle. How'd it go with Laura? About as well as you'd expect, Mark said bitterly. She claims she doesn't remember much, that she's sorry, that she never meant to hurt me. The usual bullshit. And do you believe her? Mark hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. But does it even matter at this point? Derek sighed heavily. Look, Mark, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. The story's about to break. Holly's publishing tomorrow morning. Once it's out there, there's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for that? The weight of the decision pressed down on Mark. Was he ready? To expose Ryan's corruption to the world, to potentially destroy Laura's reputation along with his own? I have to be, he said finally. It's the right thing to do. All right, Derek said. Just be careful, okay? This could get ugly. After ending the call, Mark sat in the gathering darkness, his mind racing. Tomorrow would change everything. He just hoped he was strong enough to face whatever came next. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Mark's heart. He barely slept, tossing and turning as memories of happier times with Laura warred with the pain of her betrayal. His phone chirped with a text from Holly. It's live. Brace yourself. With trembling hands, Mark pulled up the newspaper's website. There, splashed across the front page, was the headline, Tech Mobile's empire built on lies and manipulation. As he read through the article, detailing Ryan's fraudulent practices and manipulative behavior, Mark felt a grim satisfaction. The truth was out. There was no going back now. His phone exploded with notifications, messages from colleagues, old friends, even Laura's family. He ignored them all, focusing instead on getting ready for the day ahead. As he was about to leave for the office, another text came through. This one from an unknown number. You'll regret this, Hargrove. I promise you that. Mark's jaw clenched. So, Ryan wanted to play hardball? Fine. He was ready. The office was a hive of activity when Mark arrived. Whispers and pointed looks followed him as he made his way to his desk. He'd barely sat down when his boss, James, appeared at his side. Mark, my office. Now, heart pounding, Mark followed James into the corner office. The older man's face was a mask of barely contained fury. What the hell were you thinking? James exploded as soon as the door closed. Do you have any idea what kind of position this puts the company in? Mark stood his ground. I was thinking about doing the right thing, James. Ryan Caldwell is a fraud and a manipulator. He needed to be exposed. James slammed his hand on the desk. And did you consider for 1 second how this would affect us? Caldwell's company is one of our biggest clients. Was one of our biggest clients, Mark corrected. I doubt they'll be in business much longer. James's face turned an alarming shade of red. You're on thin ice, Hargrove. Very thin ice. I suggest you keep your head down and pray this blows over quickly. As Mark left James's office, he felt a mix of defiance and uncertainty. He'd known there would be consequences, but the reality of it was still jarring. His phone buzzed again. "Holly, Mark, we need to talk. Meet me at the usual place in 20 minutes. The cafe was bustling with a mid-morning crowd when Mark arrived. Holly was already there, her laptop open and a half-empty coffee cup at her elbow. "Have you seen this?" she asked without preamble, turning the screen towards him. Mark leaned in, his heart sinking as he read the headline. "Caldwell fires back. Claims of corporate espionage and defamation. He's saying I stole company secrets?" Mark asked incredulously. "That's ridiculous." Holly nodded grimly. "It gets worse. He's filing a lawsuit against you, me, and the paper. Mark, this is serious. If he can prove any of these allegations..." Mark's mind raced. "But he can't, right? We have all the evidence. It's ironclad." "In theory, yes," Holly said. "But Mark, you need to understand Ryan Caldwell has deep pockets and powerful friends. This could get very ugly very fast." As the implications sank in, Mark felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "What do we do?" Holly's eyes gleamed with determination. "We fight back. We have the truth on our side, Mark. Now we just need to make sure everyone sees it." Over the next few hours, Mark and Holly strategized, poring over every piece of evidence they had. They contacted sources, double-checked facts, and prepared for the legal battle ahead. As evening fell, Mark's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mr. Hargrove? It's Nurse Jenkins. Your wife is asking for you. She seems quite agitated." Mark closed his eyes, conflicting emotions warring within him. "I'll be there soon." When he arrived at Laura's room, he found her sitting up in bed, her face pale and drawn. A tablet lay in her lap, the screen still glowing with the damning headlines. "Is it true?" she asked as soon as he entered. "Did you really expose Ryan like this?" Mark met her gaze steadily. "Yes, he deserved it, Laura. After what he did to you, to me, to countless others." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. For everything. I never meant for any of this to happen." For a moment, Mark felt his resolve waver. The sight of Laura, broken and remorseful, tugged at something deep within him. But then he remembered the pain, the betrayal, and he steeled himself. "I know you didn't," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "But it did happen, Laura, and we can't go back." Laura reached for his hand, her touch hesitant. "Can't we?" "Mark, I know I made a terrible mistake. But what we had, wasn't it worth fighting for?" Mark looked down at their joined hands, memories of happier times flashing through his mind. For a brief, tempting moment, he imagined forgiving her, starting over. But then Ryan's face flashed in his mind, along with the memory of that text message. This wasn't over yet. Gently, he disentangled his hand from Laura's. "I'm sorry, Laura, but too much has happened. I can't just forget." A knock at the door interrupted him. They both looked up to see Ryan Caldwell standing in the doorway, his usual polished appearance notably disheveled. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Ryan sneered, his eyes darting between Mark and Laura. Mark straightened, placing himself between Laura and Ryan. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ryan held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, Tiger. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just thought Laura might want to know the truth about her noble husband." Laura's voice was sharp with fear. "Ryan, please leave. You shouldn't be here." But Ryan pressed on, his eyes locked on Mark. "Did you tell her, Hargrove, about how you've been planning this for weeks? How you used her accident as an opportunity to dig into my life, my business?" Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "I did what I had to do to expose you for what you really are." Ryan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, spare me the righteous act. You're no better than me, Hargrove. You were so focused on your precious career, you didn't even notice your wife slipping away. And now you're using her pain, her mistake, to further your own agenda." "That's not true," Mark growled, taking a step towards Ryan. But Laura's voice stopped him. "Isn't it?" He turned to see her looking at him, her eyes wide with a mix of hurt and dawning comprehension. "Mark, is that why you've been so distant? Why you haven't even tried to work things out?" Mark felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "Laura, no, it's not like that. But Ryan cut him off, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Your husband here, he's been using you, using us to make a name for himself. Quite the ambitious little climber, isn't he?" Mark lunged forward, grabbing Ryan by the collar. "Shut up. You don't know anything about us." "Mark, stop," Laura cried out. please, both of you, just stop. The commotion brought a rush of nurses and security guards. As they were separated, Mark caught one last glimpse of Laura's face, a mask of confusion, hurt, and betrayal. As he was escorted from the hospital, Ryan's parting words rang in his ears. "This isn't over, Hargrove. Not by a long shot." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, press conferences, and sleepless nights. Mark watched as his carefully constructed life crumbled around him, his job hanging by a thread, his reputation in tatters, his marriage. Well, that had been over long before the truth came out. But through it all, he clung to one truth. He had done the right thing. Ryan Caldwell's empire was falling, and the truth was finally coming to light. It was a crisp autumn morning when Mark received the call he'd been both dreading and anticipating. His lawyer's voice crackled over the line, tense but with an undercurrent of excitement. "Mark, it's Gabriella. We got news. Big news. Can you come to the office?" An hour later, Mark sat across from Gabriella Rhodes, his palms sweaty as she shuffled through a stack of papers. "So, what's the verdict?" Mark asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Gabriella looked up, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's good news, Mark. Really good news. Ryan Caldwell's lawsuit against you? It's being thrown out." Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. "What? How? Remember those documents you and Holly uncovered? Turns out, they were just the tip of the iceberg. The SEC has been conducting their own investigation into Caldwell's company. They found evidence of widespread fraud and embezzlement." Mark leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. "So it's over? Just like that?" Gabriella's smile faded slightly. "Not quite. There's still the matter of the countersuit we filed. And, well, there's something else you should know." She slid a newspaper across the desk. Mark's breath caught as he read the headline. "Tech mogul's wife speaks out. He manipulated US all, Marissa Caldwell." Mark breathed, scanning the article. Gabriella nodded. She's come forward with her own evidence against Ryan. Bank statements, emails, even recordings of him admitting to his affairs and fraudulent practices. "Mark, this is the nail in the coffin." As the implications sank in, Mark felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication and relief, but also a deep, aching sadness for all the lives that had been affected by Ryan's actions. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now?" Gabriella's eyes gleamed. "Now we go on the offensive. We're holding a press conference this afternoon. It's time to tell your side of the story, Mark." The community center was packed, a sea of eager faces and flashing cameras. Mark stood at the podium, his heart racing as he looked out at the crowd. He spotted Holly in the front row, giving him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Mark began to speak. "Good afternoon. My name is Mark Hargrove, and I'm here to set the record straight." As he recounted the events of the past months, the betrayal, the investigation, the threats, Mark felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He spoke of the victims of Ryan's schemes, of the lives that had been upended by one man's greed. "But this story isn't just about Ryan Caldwell," Mark continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it comes at a great personal cost. It's about the power of truth in the face of lies and manipulation." From the corner of his eye, Mark caught a flash of movement. His breath caught as he recognized Laura, slipping into the back of the room. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a lifetime of emotions passing between them in that single glance. Swallowing hard, Mark pressed on. "I won't pretend that my motives were entirely pure. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted to ensure that no one else would fall victim to Ryan Caldwell's schemes." As he concluded his statement, the room erupted in applause. Reporters clamored with questions, but Mark's attention was fixed on the back of the room. Laura was gone. In the days that followed, the full extent of Ryan Caldwell's crimes came to light. His company crumbled, his assets frozen, and Ryan himself faced multiple federal charges. Mark watched the news coverage with a sense of grim satisfaction, but the victory felt hollow. It was a week after the press conference when Mark received an unexpected visitor at his apartment. He opened the door to find Marissa Caldwell standing there, her face a mask of determination. "Mrs. Caldwell," Mark said, surprise coloring his voice. What are you doing here?" Marissa's lips quirked in a humorless smile. "I think it's time we talked, don't you? May I come in?" As they sat in Mark's living room, an awkward silence stretched between them. Finally, Marissa spoke. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What you did exposing Ryan. It couldn't have been easy." Mark shook his head. "I'm not the one you should be thanking. You're the one who had the courage to come forward, to speak out against your own husband." Marissa's laugh was bitter. "Courage? Is that what you call it? I stood by for years, Mark. I knew, or at least I suspected, but I was too afraid, too comfortable in my life of luxury, to do anything about it. You did the right thing in the end," Mark said gently. "That's what matters." They talked for hours, sharing their experiences, their pain, their regrets. As Marissa prepared to leave, she turned to Mark, her eyes searching his face. "Have you spoken to Laura?" she asked. Mark felt a pang in his chest at the mention of Laura's name. "No," he admitted. I wouldn't know what to say." Marissa's expression softened. "You know, Mark, Ryan didn't just manipulate Laura. He manipulated you too. He used your pain, your anger, to drive a wedge between you." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but Marissa held up a hand. "I'm not saying what Laura did was right, but love, real love, it's worth fighting for. Don't let Ryan take that from you too." As he closed the door behind Marissa, Mark leaned against it, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Could he forgive Laura? Could they ever move past this? The next morning, Mark found himself standing outside their old house. He hadn't been here since that night. Taking a deep breath, he rang the doorbell. Laura answered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mark, what are you doing here?" I think we need to talk," Mark said, his voice rough with emotion. "Really talk? About everything?" Laura hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing him to enter. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where they'd shared countless meals, countless conversations. Now, it felt like a chasm stretched between them. "I'm sorry," they both blurted out simultaneously. A ghost of a smile flickered across Laura's face. "You go first," she said softly. Mark took a deep breath. "I'm sorry for not being there, for getting so caught up in my work that I forgot what really mattered. I'm sorry for not fighting for us sooner." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Mark, I'm sorry too. For everything. What I did. There's no excuse. I was weak and selfish, and I hurt the one person I never wanted to hurt." They talked for hours, laying bare their fears, their regrets, their hopes. It wasn't easy. There were tears, raised voices, moments of painful silence. But as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the kitchen window, Mark felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "Where do we go from here?" Laura asked, her voice small and uncertain. Mark reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think I'd like to find out. Together." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. They had a long road ahead of them, filled with therapy sessions, difficult conversations, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. But as Mark left the house that evening, he felt lighter than he had in months. The next morning, Mark stood on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. He'd come here often in the past weeks, finding solace in the vastness of the ocean. As he stood there, reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past months, he heard a voice behind him. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Mark turned to see a woman standing there, her dark hair whipping in the ocean breeze. She had a surfboard tucked under her arm and a friendly smile on her face. "Yeah, it is," Mark agreed, returning her smile. "I'm Jasmine," she said, extending her hand. "I teach surfing lessons here on weekends. You look like you could use a little adventure in your life. Ever tried surfing?" Mark laughed, a genuine, carefree sound that surprised even him. "You know what? I haven't. But I think I'd like to learn." As he followed Jasmine towards the water, Mark felt a sense of peace wash over him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to it. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had also freed him. It had shown him his own strength, his resilience. And now, as he stood on the cusp of a new adventure, Mark realized that sometimes the echo of betrayal could also be the sound of a new beginning.